brother, Brandon, stepped up to buy their drinks. Nate busied himself pouring lemonade into cups. Can I see it? Little Brandon asked. Nate looked from Brandon to Ricky. Ricky shrugged. See what? Where you got hit by lightning. Nate touched the bandages on his hand. It's all wrapped up right now. But little Brandon was not a boy to take no for an answer. Well, shoot, can I touch it then? Nate's face reddened beneath the plague of freckles. The kids will say it's a miracle, Brandon explained. It must be like magic, right, Ricky? Like superpowers? The boy looked up at Nate with wide eyes. Do you got superpowers now? Nate fiddled with a cup. I wasn't really hit directly by the lightning. Yeah, but... Cut it out, Brandon, Ricky said. He was just lucky. Yeah, but... Ricky grabbed the back of the little boy's shirt. Sorry, Ricky said to Nate as he dragged his brother away. Nate about dropped the cup of lemonade in his hand. Ricky Sands said sorry to him. Jen laughed. So now you're the miracle kid, she said. Do you feel like a miracle, Nate? He shook his head. I never in a million years thought Ricky would apologize to me. That's a true miracle. As the dusky shadows stretched long across the grassy fields, and as the seagulls fussed and fought at the overflowing garbage cans, Councilman Lamprey climbed up on the slapdash stage. A microphone squealed in his hands. He cleared his throat. I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight to help one of our own in need, and I want to especially thank all the good folks who aren't even from Paradise Beach coming all this way. Applause and whistles scattered the gulls. I always say we may not have the big fancy high-rises and resorts that some of the other beach towns have, but fishing folks look after each other. Amen to that, someone called out. Of course, I wouldn't mind having some of that money all those tourists bring, Councilman Lamprey said with a wink. Before we started the football game, I'd like to invite our esteemed mayor to say a word or two. The councilman turned to a grizzly black Labrador retriever sitting at the bottom of the steps. Mayor Barnacle Bill, would you please come up here? The dog trotted up the wooden steps, wagging his slightly bent tail. A red bandana with the word mayor hung around his neck, along with an old dog collar. Would you care to speak a word or two? Councilman Lamprey held the microphone down to the mayor's silver muzzle. Woof, 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 barked the dog. Everyone cheered. The mayor wagged his tail. Councilman Lamprey popped a hush puppy in the dog's mouth. Coach Hall set about organizing a flag football game between a bunch of the kids from Nate's school and kids from their biggest rival, St. Mary's Catholic School. After the teams had been picked, Reverend Beam stepped to the center of the field and held up his hands. Silence fell across the well-fed crowd. I want to thank each and every one of you for coming out this fine evening to help our good friends and neighbors, Nate and Jonah Harlow. A wide plank of sunlight broke through the sunset and settled on the Reverend's shoulders. Now, I know our little town hasn't had much to celebrate in a long while, what with the rerouting of the interstate and that hurricane year before last. We've seen some tough times. I reckon it seemed like good luck has passed us by, like the tourists. Heads nodded. Someone hollered, you got that right. It's all them astronauts flying around up there, old man Marley called out. In a lower voice, the Reverend said, but hard times bring out the best in folks, and here we all are. Reverend Beam spread his arms wide, his big voice rising, and then the miraculous happens. One of our very own gets struck by lightning, right out of the clear blue sky, I might add, and lives. That, my friends and neighbors, is something to celebrate. Everyone seems to forget it wasn't a direct hit, Jen muttered. The Reverend smiled and turned to Nate and Jen, lounging on the sidelines. I think it's only fitting that Nate be the one to call the coin toss to see who gets the kickoff. Nate suddenly felt cold all over. His head pounded. The Reverend continued, and I'd like Nate's best friend, my lovely daughter, Genesis Magnolia Beam, to toss the coin. Jen shook her head frantically. The Reverend reached down for them. Come on up, you two, he said. Let's get this show on the road. Despite the fact that Nate did not want to cause Ricky's team to lose, and the last thing Jen wanted was a million eyes watching her. When the good Reverend Beam reaches his mighty hands down and calls you forth, all you can do is go. Okay, boys, Coach Hall said. Normally one of you to pick heads or tails, but this time Nate will pick. Coach sighed and shook his head. Ricky, if by some miracle Nate actually wins the coin toss, our team will get to kick off. If not, well... He patted Ricky's shoulder and said under his breath, sorry, son. Coach turned to Nate and Jen. Ready? The two friends stood in the middle of that field, the last of the sun's rays shining wide upon them. Nate looked nervously at the clouds gathering over the Gulf. Jen picked at her eyebrow. Ready, Nate? Nate was purely not ready. He glanced across the field, his eyes searching and then finding his grandfather. His grandfather gave him a thumbs up and a weak smile. You can do it, Nate, Miss Trundle called. He figured he might as well get his public humiliation over with. He touched the rabbit's foot in his pocket and nodded. Flip it, he said. Genesis Bean was probably the best coin flipper in all of Franklin County. The coin flipped end over end, higher and higher toward the sky. When it reached its highest point and hung there, suspended as if by wings, Nate took a deep breath. Then the strangest feeling washed over him, a warm, glowing certainty like he never felt before. It was not frightening, it was true. Heads, he called out with all the confidence he had never felt in his 11 years and 1 week on this earth. It'll be heads. A hush fell over the crowd as Jen caught the coin and slapped it on the back of her hand, just like she had done 100 million times before. But this time, when Jen lifted the hand covering the coin, she gasped and her mouth fell open. Then it closed and opened again like a stranded fish. What's wrong with that weirdo? Someone on the other team muttered. Jen, hissed Nate. Make the call. She held out, trembling her hand, for Coach and the good Reverend Beam and all the world to see. Heads, she called. It's heads. Ricky Sands whooped. He and everyone else on the team grabbed Nate and hoisted him into the air like he just single-handedly won the football game. A curious wind off the Gulf stirred the wind chimes in the tall pine next to Mr. Wood's trailer. The wind carried the whoops and the hollers from the crowd at the fish fry and the heave and the sighs of the waves upon the shore. Toots and Monk, listening with their oversized Chihuahua ears, heard the splash of a pelican diving beneath the waves to catch its own supper. And there, just there, the faint thrum and the beat of 100 flippers stroking and surging their way, many miles away, through the green waters of the Gulf of Mexico. The flippers belonged to the loggerhead turtles. Some turtles were returning to the white sand beaches of their birth for the first time to lay their eggs. These turtles were young at 20 years of age. Other turtles had returned many times before. Young or ancient, it didn't matter. The moon and the currents and an agreement older than time pulled them to the sugared dunes of Paradise Beach, where they would pool themselves upon the shore, dig their nests, lay their eggs, and by the light of the full moon, return to the sea.